All right, welcome everyone. Even though I think we're going to continue to have people join us, I am going to go ahead and get started. So I wanted to welcome everyone today. I'm actually going to stop sharing the screen for the entire session until the end when we have some calls to action, just so we can see all of our panelists. So, and to welcome you all on this very Seattle Monday, spring Monday. It is gray. I feel like I'm at home again. This on Saturday, I was like, where am I? What is this city? So thank you all for joining us. If you don't know me, my name is Emiko Atherton, and I am the Executive Director of Social Venture Partners Seattle. And I'm thrilled to welcome you today to Power, Policy, and People, Wealth, Equity in Action. We have a really powerful conversation ahead, and it actually couldn't come at a more important time. When we planned this, we had no idea that just the day before, yesterday, I should say, last night, the Washington State Legislature passed a new $78 billion budget. And when I read that, to me, it was a real reminder that the decisions being made today in our state and for our communities about taxes, investments, and priorities will really shape what's possible for equity, opportunity, and justice today and tomorrow, and that all of us on this call, have a role to play in building the future we want to see. So I just wanted to make a couple housekeeping notes for all of you. We are recording today's session for our files, and so that you can revisit it afterwards. We have the Q&A box open at the bottom of your right-hand screen. We're actually going to move to a Q&A at the end. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A, so I encourage you all, you can put in questions throughout and we will get to those at the end, so you don't feel like you have to wait till the Q&A session. And then you're also welcome to add reflections or reactions in the chat as well. So before we get started, I just wanted to frame today's conversation in part of the greater work that SVP has been doing, specifically around equity and wealth equity in particular. I think many of you attended our Wealth Inequity series, not last fall, but the fall before that, or you've joined us in Olympia for an advocacy day, or you've attended one of our advocacy sessions. But if you haven't, at SVP Seattle, we've really deepened our focus on wealth equity after deep conversations as a partnership about understanding that wealth, who holds it, how it's built, and how it's distributed, underpins so many of the injustices that we really seek to address. And that's from education to climate to housing, things that we think about all the time. And so we've expanded our work beyond our grant making and our learning together and our skilled volunteerism into advocacy because we are committed to also changing the systems that created those inequities in the first place. And today's conversation is part of that evolution. We really wanted to explore what's happening right now in Washington and nationally around wealth, power, and policy. And even more importantly, how each of us can take meaningful action. So you're going to hear some amazing personal reflections from our speakers today. I'm so excited to be joined by this panel. So we have Rian Watt, who is the Executive Director of the Economic Opportunity Institute. We are also joined by Shemona Moreno, who is the Executive Director of 350 Seattle, which is SVP Seattle's newest grantee partner. They are our new climate justice grantee as of last fall. We're so excited to welcome 350, but Shemona is actually also on the board of the Economic Opportunity Institute. And then Don Trudeau, who's an amazing leader and advocate in the community, but also one of SVP's maybe longest partners since our beginnings, and is also on the board of the Economic Opportunity Institute. So it's really serendipitous that we are here today. So I'm going to turn it over to Rian and actually just start you off with a question, which is, so I read the headline, actually even read the article this morning. And yeah, I think about the state budget. So after last couple months, we've been hearing a lot about a wealth tax. We've been hearing about how we come up with new revenue, cuts to education. What does this mean for all of us? We have a new governor. Further article, I still need to know a lot more about like what does this mean? So as I turn it over to the panel, Ryan, I'm going to ask you that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much to you and to SVP for hosting, and thank you so much to all of you for joining on this gray Monday afternoon. A disclaimer before I jump into this: I have a sick kid at home today, and so if you see someone who looks like they could be my wife and like a screaming baby come into the room, I'm technically in his room. So please forgive me if that happens, and pray for me as well. Um, so, as you heard, I'm Ryan Watt. I'm the executive director here at the Economic Opportunity Institute with two of our great board members. And because I think I'm probably the least familiar of all of you, to all of you, I'll just briefly give a little bit of my background, then answer your question. So I joined EOI as executive director about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago today, after spending most of the first part of my career working on housing and homelessness, both here in the US as a policy researcher, and technical assistance provider, and around the world in Australia, Canada, Denmark, France, and the UK. And I wanted to come to EOI because although homelessness is a particularly visceral demonstration of the inequality that is at root and at the heart of so much of our society, it is, of course, not the only example. It's in our healthcare system where one emergency can wipe out a family's entire savings. It's in our childcare system where families pay more than they can afford and workers earn less than they deserve. And it's in our tax code where Washington's wealthiest pay the lowest share of their income in taxes and working people pay the highest. And so I wanted to come to EOI to tackle some of those broader economic justice issues. And I wanted to start with that why for me, which comes out of homelessness work, but turns into this broader justice conversation, because I think there's two really important grounding facts to understand when you think about the budget season we've just gone through. So we came into this year with, depends on sort of which OFM analysis you look at, but something on the order of a 12 to $16 billion deficit um, that the legislature had to find a way to close this year. Um, and the two contextual facts that I think are really important here are one, that Washington has the 49th most progressive tax code in the country. Only Florida has a more regressive tax code than we do. And I don't mean to be chauvinistic about Washington, but I think we should have higher standards than just beating Florida. I think we can do better than that. And the second one, of course, is that the last time that the legislature faced a budget deficit like this, which was in the wake of the Great Recession, they solved, quote unquote, the budget problem by making huge cuts across the board to all sorts of services that Washingtonians rely on. And we saw what that looked like over the decade that followed. You know, we saw the impacts in people's day-to-day lives. And so as we came into this budget season, we at EOI and our partners across the advocacy space worked really hard to put together a set of progressive revenue proposals that we felt were popular, practical, and could close this budget hole without making cuts to essential services or furloughing state workers, as the governor proposed, um, or any number of other negative effects. So there were a number of different proposals there. One of them was a high earners payroll tax, basically an expansion of what has happened in Seattle with Jumpstart to around the state. Another was a tweak to the B&O tax rate, business and occupation tax rate for the largest businesses in our state. And the last was a tax on extreme wealth in the state. So a 1% tax on financial assets above $50 million. Um, that was a proposal that had a lot of widespread support in polling, that had a lot of support in the advocacy community, and we thought was a tremendous step to close up to $4 billion of that budget gap. And we felt we were in pretty good shape with a huge Democratic majority in both houses of the legislature, a newly elected Democratic governor, and a consensus that we needed to do something to fix our upside down tax code. And up until about 3 weeks left in the session, I think our faith that we would get a good progressive package was looking like it was going to be rewarded. Both the House and Senate proposed budgets that avoided the worst of an all cuts budget. Both the House and Senate included a wealth tax in their initial budget proposals. And although it's hard to know what the vote count exactly would have been on something that didn't come to a vote in the House, it looked like we were on track to pass the significant progressive revenue. Then two things happened that really shifted the conversation, I think speak to this question of wealth and power that is the subject of our talk today. One is that the governor came out and said that he would veto any tax, any budget that included a wealth tax, and I know some of you will have seen that in the news. Um, the second is that some of the biggest corporations in our state, and I'll name particularly Microsoft and Amazon, which I know folks have all sorts of histories with on this call, um, started having not public meetings because they don't show up in public to lobby for this kind of thing, but private conversations with House and Senate leadership about how they would react to a budget that increased taxes on the richest in our state. And the result of those conversations is the budget that we saw be finalized yesterday, which does include some taxes that I would call progressive. There's an increase in the capital gains tax rate there, but also includes significant tax increases on poor and working class Washingtonians, while avoiding entirely a wealth tax, while avoiding the high earners payroll tax, while avoiding some of these proposals that could have brought in tremendous amounts of money while also funding critical services. And so the challenge that I see for those of us who want Washington to be a state that lives up to its progressive values is how do we take on this consolidation of power in the hands of some of the richest corporations, not just in our state, not just in our country, but in the world, and how do we use what resources we have? And in this room, I know there's quite a lot of resources um, to fight for a different outcome. So, we have two people here on the call who are incredibly well positioned to talk about this. And in any event, I've been talking too long, so I need to turn it over to them. So I'll ask both of you, Don and Shemona, from your own roles and in your own experiences, what tools do we have to tackle this fundamental imbalance in our state politics, where we have some of the richest corporations on one side and sort of poor and working class folks on the other?
I can go first. Well, first, hello everyone. My name's Shemona. And I think over the years, I definitely have been more focused in like the climate justice arena. But as we have seen just like the evolution of just like how, um, as we've seen these corporations and the companies in Washington just get larger and larger and larger, and like walk back a lot on like climate work for the sake of making money. We've had to like delve deeper into just like what is the intersections of like focusing on economic justice and how do we like even begin to pay for even any of the clean energy, climate resiliency, infrastructure that we're even fighting for. So 350 Seattle's had to do a lot of like learning about just like, oh, this is something that needs to be um it parallel and not in just like climate solved in a silo, but climate and economic and talking about just like where money is being and power is being held. And like we have to be a part of that conversation and learn from like EOI and folks who have been fighting this fight for a really long time. And so I'm coming in as just like, oh, how do we interact with just like the decisions that are being made in order to get our little piece of the pie, but also just recognizing that it's not just about our little piece and how can we build really focusing on just like learning from everybody else to just build like putting all our pieces of the pie together in order to like build a bigger power movement, because that's what it's going to take. And from our perspective, just like as more focused on like grassroots, it's just like how are we meeting even just the needs on the ground. And a lot of it is rooted in education and even just creating space to talk about money, because that's where it starts first with like we've had even just on our staff at 350 having very real conversations about money and just like our needs, because it's really hard for people to do that. No one likes to talk about money, especially trying to get it, and like need it. And that's kind of a position of where we're at of just like, how do we fit into this landscape, um, and create an opportunity for us to like skill ourselves up, build our like understanding and also just our comfort with just being like calling something out like this isn't right. We can't be afraid to do that because like I think a lot of what we're seeing is like we compromise a lot because we don't want to push because we're scared it's going to go away and we're like we settle for scraps, and so like that's kind of where we're coming in of just like no, we don't have to settle for that. We can have deeper conversations, we can skill ourselves up, we can support each other so we can make bigger pushes and bigger demands of just what is happening in the landscape, and at the state level, as well, as supporting us on the ground in grassroots communities. And so I think that's just kind of where some of our tactics is just even talking about the emotional aspects of it all, of just like, this is a really hard thing to talk about, but I think we need to make space for it and keep talking about it and have it be part of all of our conversations, even when we're just like how it overlaps with some of our like, it's not just about heat pumps for all, it's about like, well, how do we put that? How do we make sure that that's not just the only thing, that we're taking care of everybody whole needs as well. And so that's been kind of a learning journey for us at 350. And like it's been a great experience being on the board at EOY, learning about the policies from a different perspective and not just the climate justice movement. Because I really think there's a lot to be learned when you intersect different movement pieces.
Thanks, Shemona. How about you, Don? What do you see?
I see the best tool that we have is each other. And I think that we've seen evidence of that even at the national level starting. Tesla's profits went down 71% in the last quarter. And that's because people took collective action of saying, no, I'm not going to support this. I want to make my voice heard. And those are individuals making their voices heard. And I think we've also seen something similar with Target. When they walked away from the LGBTQ community, their businesses have gone down. And I think that's how we are most effective, is by using not just our voices, but also our money, our resources, to say, this isn't okay. This is what we want the world to be. I'm a person that likes quotes because I like learning from the wisdom of other people. And so here's one. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could do only a little. And that was from Edmund Burke. And I think that's how we have to think of it. Each one of us has to think about what thing I can do, what things I can do, even though they might be small things individually, they add up collectively. And I think collective action is one of the best tools that we have, is where we are working together and not, as Shemona said, not thinking I just have to grab my piece of the pie, but saying, how can we, each one of us, put something into the pie? How can each one of us take an action today that might make a difference, or might just make my voice heard, might make people understand that this is not what we want to do. I mean, you're right that, Ryan, the legislative session that just ended, adding 6 cents to the gas tax, that's going to hurt a lot of working people. That's not small. And so things like that, we need to say, that's not okay. This is not the community that we want to live in, because the taxes that were passed are almost all regressive taxes. There was a couple of them, like you said, that were slightly less regressive, but that's going to hurt people. And the B&O taxes even are going to hurt small businesses, because those are that's real money that's going out the door that they can't reinvest back into the business. So I think what we can do, we can do our own individual part, and we can also talk to other people and make sure that other people are doing their individual part, and that they don't see this as so overwhelming that it doesn't make sense to do anything. It makes sense to do something today, and it makes sense to do something tomorrow. And I think that's the best tools that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I've also been, Don, you and I spoke last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? One of the things I'm reflecting on, and maybe I'm anticipating some of the Q&A that we're going to do, because I know how much expertise is in the room with us right now and how much experience with this region. Something seems to have shifted in the last couple of years about how some of the larger companies in our region think about their responsibilities to our region. Don, you and I have spoken about how Microsoft for many years really prided itself on being a good corporate citizen and a good citizen of this region, and really reinvesting in the people and the places and the incredible resources, both natural and otherwise, that have made this a great place to live, work, and do business. And to some extent, Amazon has had that same view as well. I think maybe a little bit less, but that's my own personal editorializing. But something seems to have shifted for both those companies and for others, T-Mobile, that operate in our region, where they no longer think of themselves as being stewards of this place in quite the same way. Again, maybe I'm just setting up for Q&A. I'm curious if others have reflections on it. But Don, I don't know if you're seeing the same thing.
I was surprised. That Microsoft and Amazon, but particularly Microsoft, took such a strong opposition to the wealth tax. I understand that there's wealthy people there that would be impacted by it, but Microsoft, at least in my experience when I was there, and it's been a while, was very much committed to investing in the communities, very much committed to making this a good place for everyone to live and work and be. And that does seem to have shifted somewhat. I don't really understand why, other than, leadership, but it does seem to be that there's less investment in the community, less concern about making this a healthy place for all to thrive. And I think we just, again, it's partly, talking with your dollars, is that the product we want to support, or not?
Yeah. Emiko, I think you're up next for taking us in our next direction here.
I think Shemona looks like Shemona. You
Oh,
look
were
like
you going to
you
say
wanna
something, Shemona? Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I would say go ahead because we've got plenty of time. People are here to hear you. So
Shemona, I'm curious how you're seeing, in this last week and a half, I know your organization, many climate organizations in the broader C3 community have been really thinking about how to band together in the face of what might be fairly direct attacks from the Trump administration. What have those conversations with other climate and environmental groups, but also sort of the broader advocacy community, showed you about solidarity?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's kind of like one of the things I was talking with a friend with who leads a national coalition around climate financing. And we were talking about just like maybe that's one of the reasons why, well, this is speculating, of just like that the executive orders didn't come down because they realized how fast we could mobilize, set our differences aside, set our like these worries in our local regions and band together. That 5,000 people and like thousands more wanting to get onto a briefing to learn how we could stand together was enough to be like, well, maybe this isn't a good idea to come after these folks. Like, I think we reminded ourselves and our wider movements that there is power in us being together and like collective energy and pooling of resources, and so much we can learn. And like it's been an inspiration for us to like double down on just like the way we do this work is together. And so coalition building and doing it across different movements is key, because there was definitely a lot of organizations that weren't just climate related. It's like, and it's not just climate that was affected, that it could have spanned a bunch of other things. Anybody who's working on DEI, LGBTQ plus IA stuff, like it could have, and it was an inspirational moment of just like, we actually can do this together. And look, we proved it. And luckily nothing didn't happen yet. But we know we can do it.
I'm not counting on it not happening. But it is heartening that they got scared. Don, you've been working obviously with SVP, but also broadly to sort of improve the community for many, many years. I'm reflecting, a couple of weeks ago, I was down in Olympia to testify in favor of the wealth tax, and I saw a couple of people on this call, including Kathy, forgive me, I'll call you out. Kathy testifying really persuasively in favor of the wealth tax. And I say persuasively because as I was watching the faces of the committee members in the room, hearing someone say, I would be subject to this tax and I am supportive of it, was really meaningful for them to hear. Don, you've been in this work for a while. What do you think that people who are wealthy or who are high income can do, and how should they use their voice in this moment?
I think exactly as Kathy did, to say, I would be subjected to this, and I believe in it. I believe that this is the community that we want to live in. I think that is an important voice to say. I did a trip at this couple decades ago to Finland to study their early learning system. And one of the high executives of Nokia was there, and he was subjected to 70% income tax. And the people in the room said, doesn't that bother you? And he said, well, yeah, nobody likes to pay taxes, but this is the community I want to live in. This is the world I want to live in, so that the people are supported. So I pay my 70% income tax, but I still do well. And it allows the rest of our citizens to have a good and productive and good life. And I think that's really the message, that that we need to make sure that we continue to say is that the world that we want to live in is not where it's concentrated with a handful of billionaires that get to make all the decisions and have all the power. The world we want to live in is a world that's fair and all of us can prosper in. Some of us will do better than others, but we want everyone to do well.
One of my reflections, having worked in the nonprofit space for a little while now, is that it is always remarkable to me how people who broadly share a huge amount of values, almost everyone working in the nonprofit space does, manage to find ways to fight with one another so creatively and so reliably, despite these incredible shared values. Over, again, my editorial view, often fairly petty stuff. Yeah, Shemona, this one's to you because you, like me, are in the nonprofit world. Uh, how do we tackle that problem? Do you see it in your world? Like, how do we tackle the problem of these this tyranny of small differences almost between ourselves in a moment that I think calls on us for really broad solidarity?
Yeah, this has been definitely a big one that we've had to navigate, especially in the climate movement. We tend to get on our own way sometimes, fighting over like that doesn't no. And I think for us, I can only speak to how we've been dealing with it in the 350 Seattle landscape and how we've been trying to build like a wider network of partners. And it's doing that. Like one kind of like getting out of our bubble and like talking to other people working on other things, to be like, oh, they've already solved this problem. We can just learn from them. Or like they're not even worried about that. We're worried about something else that actually impacts us, kind of like gets us out of our head a little bit and stop fighting. And I am also a big proponent of conflict resolution, especially trauma-informed conflict resolution, as like a foundation of doing like group work or any equity work, because I think we in the US have such a like no experience to like that we don't really learn how to do that in school. It's like it's you kind of have to take it on yourself of whether or not you want to have like constructive, conversations and like setting the stage when you go into like different spaces of just like we're gonna struggle together, not against, you know, like just being transparent of like we're not going to agree, we're not going to hold hands and everything's sunshine and rainbows, but there's a way we can do this like respectfully and learn from each other, and be okay and just apologize when we make mistakes and focus on repair. Like if you name that up front, I think it kind of like sets people at ease of just like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe we'll have like our little moments of like we're going to argue around what color we're going to do the flyer, but then I think we can call in like some of the agreements we've set ahead of like this is not something we want to argue about. Let's get back to the original goal here, which is the work that we're doing, not the whether the flyer is orange.
Yeah, I heard something in a coalition call on revenue this year that I really loved, which was, I think there's a tendency in all coalition spaces, but especially in Seattle with its light passive aggressivism that happens. So we were discussing something. The conversation had been a little fractious about which way we should go, and someone started to wrap the conversation up by saying, "Well, I think we're coming to a consensus here." And someone else raised their hand and said, I actually don't think we have a consensus here. I'm hearing two different approaches, and I think we need to figure out if we're going to do one of them or both of them or neither of them before we end this call. And I just love that because it wasn't making it personal. It wasn't trying to create conflict for the sake of conflict, but it was saying we actually have not resolved something here, and we need to figure it out if we're going to move forward together. And I really appreciated that. And I called the person afterwards to say that I appreciated that. Um, so thank you. Okay. My baby brain head has lost track of time once, so I think maybe I have time for one more question to Dawn Emiko, and then pass it to you. Okay, perfect. So Dawn, I'm curious. This is a time when it's a difficult time to have both a heart and a brain, and it's a particularly difficult time if you like to be informed, because you sort of step into the news stream and you find yourself overwhelmed by the deluge of truly awful things happening all over the world. How do you keep your hope up and keep yourself moving forward in an environment where it can be easy to feel hopeless?
I think you just really have to remind yourself that um, this this is a terribly challenging time, no question about it. But again, there are good people that care. I mean, and each one of us has something that we can do to make it a little bit better today for other people. I was majorly impressed with Cory Booker and his stand in Congress, that he was able to have the fortitude to be able to talk for 25 hours. But also when he was interviewed about it later, they was like, well, what are the Democrats going to do about this? And he said, this isn't a Democrat problem. This is a country problem. We're all being faced with the same dangers. And so we can't be in little tribes. We have to think beyond our particular little pocket in the world, and believe that the other people care like I do. Other people are disturbed like I am. And using conversation with people, I think, is one of the ways that you stay encouraged, because you're reminded that it's not just you, that other people are disturbed and want to take action and want to do what they can to make it better. I think the more that you are isolated, the harder it is to not be in despair. The more that you broaden the people that you're talking to, and you broaden the people that you're listening to, easier it is to find strength in that. I think if I was just on my phone reading the headlines, it would be very, very hard not to be in deep despair. But when I talk to other people that are good people, that are doing the work that Shemona is doing, they're doing the work that Ryan's doing, they're doing the work that SVP is doing, that gives me strength, and it gives me the ability to not to have optimism, even though it's a dark time. I'm still optimistic. I believe that ultimately we will go in a course correction.
Perfect. Yamiko.
Great. Well, thank you. I loved hearing from all three of you. And I want to say we wanted to spend a lot of time opening this up to questions. So we've got the group chat open because there is enough of us that I think if we raised hands, that would be too much. If you can put your question in the chat, I'll go ahead and read it out loud. So please take the time to do that. But while we're doing that, I have a concrete question for maybe it's not, maybe it's both aspirational and concrete. It's a two-part question. Is when I think about, what just happened in the legislature, I can't help but feel a little discouraged. Like, how are we still talking about this? It seemed like there was good momentum. So the two-part question is like, what is your hope in 5 years for Washington? And I know because a lot feels out of control right now, like the federal government and whatever, like so much feels out of control. But in Washington, I think there's still a lot of hope. And Don, you bringing us back to that. So what's your hope in the next five, where are we in 5 years? And then like, what is one concrete thing that anyone on this call could be doing right after this? And we'll have some calls to action, but just, what is something you see that can move us towards that? Because it's like, I need the hope to keep myself going, and I want to do something to feel like I'm a part of it. So if any one of you want to go ahead and start answering that, and then please go ahead and use the chat to ask any questions you like. Great. I do already see one. So we'll get to let's do my question while people add their questions to the chat box.
Well, my kid will be starting public school in 5 years, so I really hope we've figured out our public school funding in 5 years concretely. But more broadly than that, one of the things that I think about is I think if Washington State was an independent country, which I'm not suggesting that we become one, it would have something like the 20th largest economy in the world, bigger than Norway, bigger than Denmark. And to me, this is a call to think big. There is no good reason that we cannot build the society we want right here. We don't, it would be helpful to have federal support, but we don't need to wait for federal support to build what we need right here. We can and should be dreaming big about the society we want. And, I see that in paid family medical leave, which EOI and many of the people on this call were a big part of getting passed in 2017, and which is now paying out benefits to millions of Washingtonians across the state. We can do that time and time and time again, and build a great society here. And so that's my dream, that in 5 years we've done that. And I won't answer the second part of your question because I'll let others talk and get to the others.
In 5 years, I think for us, I resonate with what Ryan said. It's just like we're just going to build what we want to see. And for us, this is our time to be bold, and to be not as concerned with like some of the the metrics of like winning this thing, but winning collectiveness, collective power, building that, because I think that is where we're going to see a lot of change happen. If we can get enough people together to inspire a lot, that second tier of people invested, and we can move a lot of things. And at 350, we're kind of already doing that, and we're really excited about that, like the coalition building that we want, and that it'll be statewide. And because we can kind of see it happening in California around their like Make Polluters Pay campaign, like the coalition that they've built there, the variety of people that are involved in that fight, even though they're being hammered by the oil industry, is impressive, is inspiring. There's youth all the way up to like the elderly. There's like unions and climate or there's just like I think that's something that we should have here in Washington, and I think it will be something that we'll have in 5 years.
I guess my hope for Washington is that we really become an intergenerational force, that people are young people, middle-aged people, older people are all pulling on the same rope together. I think it's easy to kind of think of different generations as having different values. I don't really believe that. I think that fundamentally we have the same values. We all want to be safe. We all want to be fed. We all want to have a place to live. We all want our families to thrive. And I think we can agree on that. I think that that's something that if that's the way that we approach how we want to see our future, I think it's a common future. And so I really hope that we are able to do more, as I said, intergenerational work together, because I think that's also how you learn. And I think that's also how you have new ideas. And you're leaving a legacy behind. You're leaving the strength and the work behind. It's going to continue because I worry sometimes that some of us are aging out, of this work, and we want to make sure that that the work continues beyond any generation or any individual or any person. I think that's a really important thing to me, and hopefully then that will allow us to have a better society that we want to live in by having that happen, and by having that, again, that collective impact, that collective force, to speak to the people in power.
Great, thank you. And Shemona and Don, I see a question, but I just wanted to revisit if there's like one thing that you would if I asked you like what could I do after this to move towards your vision? Like, is there one concrete thing someone could do who's on this call?
Start talking to other people, really start trying to build that coalition of whether it's a formal one like Shemona's been talking about, or whether it's an informal one, but really just start talking to people and listening to people, understanding what other people need and understanding how you can help contribute to making that happen. I think that's the most important thing.
Great, thank you. I love that. Shemona, did you want to add something?
I think for it's just like become like a little bit more community minded about it. It doesn't have to be this transactional thing. You are part of the community, and so therefore you should get to, like Dawn said, get to know people, start talking to people, like and it's I think that's where like, and leverage that power that you have having wealth, and there is power there that can be leveraged for the community.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to read a question off right now from the chat. If you could make one critical recommendation to family foundations regarding their philanthropic efforts, what would it be? Does anyone want to take that? And I'm going to maybe make an assumption. Well, no, I won't. I'll just leave that question how it is.
Well, I'll say, I mean, there's so many different family foundations, right? And they're doing so many different things, and many have already significantly changed the way that they operate in response to conversations that have been going in philanthropy for 15 years or more. Um, so while knowing that this won't apply to all of them, I'd say a couple of things. One, general operating support is extraordinarily helpful over and above sort of project specific funding with really large reporting requirements. But a lot of foundations already know that and are already doing that. So the second thing I would say is use your voice as a foundation and talk to local leaders, use your convening power. I think foundations can get tunnel visioned on the money part of things, and that is obviously essential and the central thing that they do. But they also play a really important role in shaping civic conversation. And because they're sort of durable actors or players in a lot of these conversations, they have credibility that allows them to start conversations or direct conversations in a way that other groups can't. They're also seen as sort of uh, less advocacy oriented, I suppose, than pure advocacy groups, and that again gives them credibility to speak in a way that is valuable. So I would say use your voice.
Right, would anyone else like to answer that question? Dawn.
I would say look for leverage points.
Hmm.
Look for things that you can invest in that can have broader impact than potentially one thing. Look for other foundations that have similar values that you do and see where you have things in common, and maybe think about how you can support more organizations by having that kind of a conversation. But I think more than anything for me, one of the reasons why I've been associated with EOI for so long is because EOI really is a leverage point. It's the kind of work that EOI does to really try to create legislation and laws. Those have foundational impact, like the Pay Family Leave. That's a huge leverage point in terms of being able to benefit many people in our state. So I think that is one of the things that I try to do.
Excellent. Anyone else want to answer that question? All right. And just a reminder, if you have a question, drop it in the chat box. But this one is, how do you think we can get young people involved in activism? I feel like we are losing their engagement. Shemona, I would love to ask you to start off with it, because I know you think about and do this a lot.
Yeah. We're actually was with a couple friends talking about this very thing the other day, and there's like the blunt thing that we've gotten feedback where it's just like, be less boring. Like honestly, from some youth, like have more fun. And so it's just like, all right, how do we do that without turning this into a lecture? Because we've definitely had hit or miss of like, we're having fun, and then oops, accidentally just had like a 45-minute lecture. Okay, I get it. We're working on it. We're working on it, you know. But I think that is a big thing of just like, this is such hard work. And then like, and especially depending on like young people, like what age range you're talking about, like there's a certain range where it's just like, you have to recognize that they're still children, you know, that they're still young and that they're still like learning about things, trying things on, and then just like making space for that. And some of that making space for like the silly, the fun, the like creative. And I think sometimes, especially with like some organizing in the climate movement, especially, we can kind of just like get set in our ways and we forget to look up and we're like, oh yeah, maybe we should try something different. So that's something that we're trying to be more like balanced about, of just like, yes, this is a really serious thing, but like there's a way we can have fun with it as well.
I kind of feel like I have early onset grumpy old man syndrome, but I think I can still sort of speak to this to some extent, which is uh, I think that for a lot of people prior to, I'm thinking particularly of the people who are sort of 14 to 25 right now. For a lot of the generations previous to that, the first step in a lot of effective activism was convincing people that there was a problem that they should care about. So sort of articulating that there's this issue, you're new here on planet Earth, but you should be aware of this thing. And I just don't feel that needs to happen anymore in the same way. Like today's young people understand that there's a problem. In fact, they understand there's many problems. They have a deep sense that things are broken. What they have less of a sense of because they haven't been around as long is that things can get better. And anyone who's been around a little bit longer, knows that, there are big problems and they sometimes get solved. I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish. Like obviously not every big problem gets solved, but if you've been around for a while and you've been working, you have seen some things move from this was a problem to we decided to work on it and it got fixed. And so, as I think about this question, I think about how do we demonstrate to young people that there is a path forward for some of these problems that seem intractable, that we aren't doomed to the future that appears in front of us right now, that we can do something to change it because they have a sense that there's a problem. I think we need to show them that there are solutions as well.
Great. And it looks like I think we have time for one last question, and it's for you, Ryan. So it is, I have a different question for Ryan. Curious to know how the sausage is made info. Did EOI or other advocates have any input or conversations with Microsoft, Amazon, T-Mobile, Costco leaders in shaping proposals? E.g., in arms control, there are diplomats in unilateral combos first before putting proposals on the table.
Yeah, I love the implication of the two metaphors that like we're doing sausage arms control between the two. But I'll just speak for myself, Stephanie. I didn't personally speak with any leaders of those particular companies. I've spoken with folks in the business community regularly and folks at the Chamber of Commerce, but not those particular leaders. I can't speak for everyone in my coalition. I'm sure that there are folks who do have relationships there and did have conversations. I'm always happy to talk to anyone. We may, as we talked about earlier, we may disagree. We may not have consensus, but it's worth knowing what people are thinking. And I think I'll just leave it at that. I didn't have conversations, but I'm always happy to talk.
Hopefully next time. So we are right at time. I want to end by one, just thanking all of the panelists. I love this because when I was talking to Ryan a few months ago, we were talking about what we could do together, and I happened to be perusing the website of EOI, and I was like, wait, I knew Don was on your board, but Shemona too. That just like speaks volumes in terms of like how it's all coming together in the work that we have been doing. It reminds me also of SVP. Someone once said to me, like, you go to an SVP event and you're not quite sure what's bringing all these people together, which is what I feel is what makes us so unique and so special, as it is really a cross-race, cross-class, cross-cultural community. And we are so lucky that EOI is part of that community. So just a huge thank you all again for bringing all of your insights. We always love to have calls to actions, which is really around our give, learning, and acting together. So one, I would say, I know I will make the pitch that EOI is doing incredible work. And, as we think about, I know it can feel really, I feel really overwhelmed right now. There is so much, just so much terribleness going on. And it feels, and I don't have unlimited time or resources. And so it's where can I get started? And, one place I think is looking at giving to EOI and others that do that work. Also, I'll make a plug for 350 Seattle, our fabulous grantee, but organizations who are doing that work on the ground, really at that intersection of, I'd say, racial equity and justice, which is SVP's really guiding principle. Continuing to learn. So we always have events going on, and I'm going to just drop the link to our event calendar in the chat, but where we have our own events, but also events that you from our grantee partners. ACT. I think there were, what I heard today a lot was a lot of calls to action, and I wanted to make a special plug that one of those ways. One, you should sign up for the EOI newsletter. And that two, we actually have ways for everyone on this to get involved right now. So we have two new committees forming at SVP Seattle. There are advocacy and an engagement task forces. These are going to be task force is really putting together how we do our advocacy moving forward, and also how we continue to engage in the community. And we're lucky, Melissa Johnson, if you want to wave, I don't know if people can see, Melissa's the chair of our advocacy task force, and Gregor, who is on this call, is also a member. He's on the board. And Melanie, who can also wave, is the project manager for that. And our board chair, Tali, who's pictured, Tali Roush is pictured in the slide, is the chair of the engagement task force. That's developing ways and recruiting people to really go out as a partnership and support our community. And Melanie is also the project manager in this. Maybe you could drop your email in also in the chat box, Melanie. People are interested in joining those. Those are ways you can immediately take action. And I always say, and doing this together, which is joining SVP. I will, I think you will send a follow-up email with ways that you can join us if you aren't already. But just another huge thank you again for joining us today. Really hot off of the budget news in Olympia, what it means. I think we're still going to figure that out, what the governor's going to do, and also bringing us together to give us hope. And in 5 years, I really hope and think that we're not going to be 49th anymore, Ryan. And it's going to be because of many, the three of you, but also many of you who joined us today working together. I think, Ryan, just thinking about the future that you want to build for your child and what that will mean really practically for Seattle Public Schools. Shemona, I wrote down when you're thinking about just, you started in climate justice and then learned it was really, to do that work, it was so intersectional with economic justice and the ways that people can get involved with 350 Seattle. And doing all of that work. And then Dawn, I think when you were talking about intergenerational work and then the advice you have, which is talking to people, I want to like underscore how important that is. When I think about something like progressive revenue, those of you all of us who are on this call, I think can start to have those conversations. And many of you are close to people who are making those decisions as well. And how can we collectively, speak to people together, start to, listen to their concerns, but also be able to really hear what they need and to share why it's important to us. Because I think in 5 years we can become a state with much more progressive revenue, and it will really take all of us working together, acting together, and listening and speaking to each other. So thank you all and have a great week.
Thanks all.
Thank
Thank
you.